Hello lovely people, and thank you for joining me for another art video. Last video I unboxed a large number of Mission Gold watercolor tubes, and inside one of the boxes was a free sample of 2 sheets of 100% cotton Magello watercolor paper. So I've decided to test out one of those sheets. This is the natural white. I've sketched out a little frog from 2 different references, and I drew in some leaves, but I think I'm not going to paint them. I think I just want to paint the frog. So let me mix up some colors really quick. I am using the Magello Mission Gold watercolor paints. It only seems fitting. I'm starting out with lemon yellow. And here I forgot to leave some white for the highlights. Lifting it out didn't work very well, maybe because I was using a tissue. This yellow isn't particularly staining. It's not a big deal. Now I'm coming in with permanent yellow light. It's just a little bit more orange, a little darker. Ultimately, I don't think it really makes a huge difference, but I'm also trying to get some depth into the froggy, and I think that's accomplished by layering colors. I'm going to be doing a lot of glazing. Red-orange. This color, I think, ultimately makes a lot more difference than the permanent yellow light. It's also very strong, very vibrant, and so I was a little timid in putting it down. Now it's time for Permanent Red Deep, which I think is one of my favorite reds. It's just strong and red and pretty much what you imagine when you think of a red. It might seem a little haphazard the way I'm laying down the colors. I'm basically just laying them down, letting them spread the way they want to, and then I come in after a little bit, after they've done their thing and smoothing out some of those tendrils, I want the colors to mix kind of naturally. Here I experienced one of the first problems with the paper. I don't know for sure if it was me or if it is the paper, but the paint has bled outside of the lines. And I'm pretty certain that I didn't paint there. There's also these two odd lines going across the body of the frog. This color that I'm using now is one of my favorite Magello colors. It's called Red Brown. It's replaced my burnt sienna. It's less red, it's darker, but it's just so gorgeous. And there's more bleeding outside of the nose now, and I know that I didn't do that. I know that I didn't go outside of the nose. So this is definitely a paper issue. So now that this has dried a little bit, it's still in the process of drying, but I want to show you how I get rid of these areas that bled a little bit. I'm not sure why. This brush, oh, can't even see it. This brush, I don't even know if it's made anymore. It's a size 4 Raphael Sepia Deco, and I really like it. Better than any other brush that I've tried for cleaning up edges. It's just hard enough that it lifts the paint, but it doesn't damage the paper. I've had this for years. I don't know where I got it. I'm pretty sure I ordered it from overseas, but I can't find it anymore. wanted to come back in and make this part a little more orange. I ended up with a little bit too much yellow in there. Now I have too much water in my brush. This will help me in my next step. There's a method to my madness. So now that this is dry, I want to apply some masking fluid to try to recreate that dimpled effect on the back of the frog. Don't want it to seem too uniform. Okay, now that the masking fluid has dried, I just want to deepen this area, add some more shadowing. This color is a mixture of the red-brown with just a touch of Prussian blue. This brush is kind of big. If you can see my hand shaking, that's a side effect of a medication that I take. Sometimes it's pretty bad, and I was having a hard time controlling my brush and getting it to go where I wanted it to. Trying to create a mottled appearance in the frog's skin, so I'm purposely trying not to do smooth layers. So here you can see how carefully I'm laying down the paint in a nice even line. I'm not going anywhere that I don't want to. And still, after a little while, that line on the eye ends up uneven and the color ends up going where it's not meant to. So again, more confirmation that there's a problem with the paper. I don't know if it's because it was sitting in a box of watercolors for a while before somebody bought it, or if that's just the paper. I do in some areas get a little fiddly, which whenever you get fiddly, you increase your chances of making the painting start to look overworked. And I think I approached that with this little frog. Some of it was like with this eye here, I went in with a color that was too light, so then I had to go over it again and then soften it with water. All of that is annoying the paper. And this paper in particular seems a little sensitive to going over it multiple times. So very often when a painting starts looking overworked, it's not just that the paints are mixing and starting to look muddied, it's that the paper underneath is beginning to be annoyed. And it's not behaving quite the way it did when it was fresh. And that can also happen because rather than waiting for the paint to dry before going in with my subsequent layer, I just go back in and keep fiddling with it when the paint hasn't completely dried. So I'm flooding more water in there, which is moving the pigments below it that haven't dried yet, rather than just letting it dry, doing a proper glaze. It's one of the hardest things I find with watercolor painting is stopping and just letting it dry, being able to tell when the paper has reached that point where it's no longer going to behave the way it needs to for you to get the result that you want, and to just stop, let it dry thoroughly, and come back and try again later. Trying again with this eye. I'm still having troubles with the paper and getting the paint to do what I want it to do. I know that one of the lessons that we often hear when painting with watercolor is to let the paint do what it wants and that you don't really have control over it. But in fact, you do. You can really control the paint and get it to go exactly where you want it to go. So here I'm using what they call Cerulean Blue. To me, it really just looks like a phthalo blue. It's very pretty. It's not quite as intense as a straight phthalo blue, so they did do something, but the color really doesn't look anything like a Cerulean Blue. And so I find when I'm using this color in paintings that I use it like I would a phthalo blue, not a cerulean blue. I'm coming in with some Prussian Blue. This is the same color that I used to darken the red-brown. For harmony's sake, I'm trying to just stick to the same, I think, maybe 6 colors. So I wanted to record this in real time because I personally have found that a lot of times when I'm watching painting videos on YouTube, they're sped up for good reason, because most people don't want to sit there and watch literally paint dry. But I think it also gives sometimes a false impression of how fast and carefree and easily the paintings are done. Even though I knew that the footage was sped up, I would find myself subconsciously comparing, like, wow, they make it look so easy. Look how smooth that line is. And it's really not. It just looks better because it's sped up. This is like how painstaking, and my hand is shaking and the line is trembling and I'm putting it down very slowly and I'm going back in to fix something that's bled where it wasn't supposed to. A lot of that stuff gets cut out when watching a video on YouTube. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I personally prefer paintings that are real time, so you can see the actual process. You can see how the artist is laying down the paint, what they're fiddling with, what they're just confidently laying down and leaving as it is. I think it helps people see the painting process more realistically. Now time for masking fluid on the little frog legs. I realized that because I have masking fluid down, I really need to get another layer of paint over the entirety of the legs to make those masked areas stand out. So I end up going over everything again, adding a little bit more color. This darker blue is the same mixture of Prussian blue and red-brown, just with more blue this time. Darkening some of the shadows. After they dried, I realized that they weren't quite as dark as I would like. Time for the eye. This is one of the most important parts, in my opinion, when painting an animal, because the eye is what gives it that life. So I usually wait until the very end to paint in the eye, because it's kind of like, for me, that little magic moment, that thing that you anticipate the whole time. And plus, then you don't have to worry about potentially ruining it as you paint everything else. And to try to get depth, I go in with an under painting kind of, but not really, because I'm painting directly on top of it before it's dried. But it creates that kind of gradation of light, I think, with a little bit of under color. I don't know how to explain it, but it might even be unnecessary. It's just something that I do. And you can see the paint bleeding out from the eye. Here it might be because I had messed with that area above the eye so much, but the eye color is bleeding out into it. And I might have cleaned it up, but I knew that I would also lift some of the orange, and it actually helped make it look more real, I think, because it wasn't so clean and perfect. Here I'm using more muted colors than were in the frog. I'm using the yellow ochre and red brown just to create an underpainting for the ground, because I want the ground to look kind of mottled, maybe like there's some pebbles underneath or some dead leaves or something. So I didn't want to just come in immediately with the brown ground color. I wanted something to show through. Trying to make that eye look recessed, and I added a little bit of yellow green just to add a little bit of contrasting color to make it stand out a little bit more. This ground color is the same mixture that I used for the shadow on the frog. It's the red brown mixed with Prussian blue. One of the most fun parts of painting, removing the masking fluid. And then going in and deepening some of the shadows, painting over some of those light dots because they wouldn't be that light in the shaded areas. Adding just a little more yellow and orange to those dots to blend them in a little bit. Don't want to go overboard. I realized I was missing some shadow that the leg would be casting on the body. And ta-da! There's my little frog. I don't even know what type of frog this is. I just did a search for, I think, colorful frog on Unsplash. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think it looks really cute. Overall, I think this paper isn't bad. I did encounter problems with it, the bleeding, and that it didn't seem to like being worked very much. It became ornery pretty quickly, more quickly than, say, with Arches or Hanamuna. But again, like I said, I don't know if the bleeding is a trait of the paper per se, or just this specific sheet of paper. I have one more sheet that I might paint on, and I'm going to use the back of this one. I always paint on the backs of my paintings. And those weird lines that were across the body, well, they disappeared, or I painted over them, so you can't even see them anymore, so that wasn't a problem. Yeah, I think this paper is pretty good. It's not my favorite. I wasn't blown away, but it was better than cellulose, that's for sure. It's a nice 100% cotton watercolor paper. And there's my little frog. Thank you guys very much for joining me for this little painting of a cute little frog. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And I will see you guys again, maybe painting on the other sheet of Magello watercolor paper. See you guys next time. Bye.